Alright, so we left off with me talking about bcrypt, and I said that we would have to install that. So let's go in and do that right now. So if your app is running, just stop the run. And do an npm I on bcrypt. Well, let's see. It didn't like that. I thought that was all we had to put in. Let's double check. npm my bcrypt, I thought that's what I typed in. Try it again. I don't know.
The first time I tried it, it didn't work. Then the second time I tried it.
Yeah, same here. It worked fine.
Mine came up as it usually does. Yeah, just like that. One moderate severity.
Yeah, that's
error.
Well,
my team packages it.
I don't think that's gonna really gonna matter. I don't think very much. We'll see. All right. Well, then we've got to, start the project back up again. So that should have done nothing to break it, and it hasn't. Good. All right. So I've gone over this before with you. That's why I did that before the break. So luckily, at least, we can kind of run through this hopefully a little faster now. So I'm going to come down to here where I've got my constants at the top, and I'm going to do a const bcrypt equal require bcrypt. All right. Now to come in here where we actually have to make the change is in our user model. Okay, so let's go in under models and let's go back to our user.js. All right. Now we're going to make a couple changes in here. So we are going to put in the curly braces so we can add some stuff, and we'll put some in here and we'll put some in here. All right. Don't worry, that error will go away as soon as we start to fill this stuff in. So type string, that's nothing new. You all know what that means. Required true. Again, you all know what that means. The one in here that's new is unique. True. There isn't the concept of a primary key. There is an object ID in here. So by saying unique, what we're saying is we want, if there already is a Jeff S in there for a username and another person tries to register as Jeff S, it should give an error. All right. So in here, we just want type string, and we'll also make required true. All right, that should, see if it does, should get rid of all the errors. I'm trying to figure out why there's still errors, but
I don't think the word string should be in front of user.
you're right. It should just be the curly brace. There we go. And it should not also be in front of the word password, because we are re-implementing the way that it's set up. So that is correct. Thank you. Now, we're not done though. We're done with the schema part. All right, so our schema has been redone, but we have to add some code right where my cursor is right now. I'm just going to open up a blank line or two, and I'm going to put it right here. Does everybody have this stuff in there? All right. So we put in here user schema dot pre I'll just put it in, we'll go over it afterwards. It's not long, it's about 5 lines, so. See anything? Why does it give me that? Pre-save function next. Const user equal this. Encrypt.hash user.password, comma 10. I'm missing a comma there after the number 10. Hopefully that made, yep, that made everything go away. So I'll give you a second to put that in. All right, so taking that from the top, this is just stuff that's built into this. So what we're saying here is we want to go in and we want to save. But before we do that, that's the pre. To say this is the current object I'm working with. It's a keyword in JavaScript. So we're setting user equal to this. That's going to make everything the object has available to us. All right? Then we're telling it that, again, the number of salts we want to use. So we're saying to run the bcrypt and what we're running it on. All right. So we are running bcrypt and we are running it on whatever was typed in, and we're salting it 10 times. All right. And the result of that should be the hash. So we want to replace what the user did type in with the hashed version of what the user typed in. And then the function requires next when it's all done. All right. Now, what should happen here, at least, is if we do a file save, and we come in here, and we go back to the project again, and refresh, it should still work. In other words, there shouldn't be anything wrong. We should still be able to go to Home, to New Post, and to New User. All right, don't worry about registering somebody yet. We're going to look at all that stuff later. I'm just wanting to build the functionality in right now. That's what I'm the most concerned with. All right. So let's see. Did that. Now, when we looked at this before, if you remember up, where is that? News user controller. Okay. All right, we've got in here right now that we just want to go to the register page, and that should be fine. All right. So we had our new user controller. All right. Plus we did our store user controller. All right. What we should be able to do here, is this. I'm going to try it and we'll see if it works. All right, you can watch, and then if it works, try it. Otherwise, it's up to you. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to make a new user. So I'm going to type in Jeff, and I'm going to make that Jeff as well, just because it's easy. All right? Well, that ain't good. Can't go to user/register, so we'll have to fix that. But what should have happened, because that was totally valid to do that, is it should have just went back to the home page. And then I was going to try to do another new user, and I was going to put in Jeff again. And then what should have happened is over here, it should have given me an error because of the code that we put in, all right, because of the code that we put in right here. Because we're trying to create, but if error, that would be an error because we have specified in the model that that field must be unique. Okay? All right. Now, again, when we take our next break, which probably will be fairly soon, all right, but when we do, I'll see if I can fix that error. But let's go in and do this. We need a page so that the user can log in, because if you look right now, all right, we've got home, we've got new post, and we've got new user. But if you register as a new user, then the idea is you should be able to log into the site. All right? So let's build that right now. All right? And to start with, let's go down. So hopefully, you're to the point where it makes sense if I just say to you, okay, we got to build a new page. You're like, oh, it'll be a new EJS page. All right, and it's going to be its own page, so we're not going to go into layouts. It'll be in views someplace. All right, so yeah, I'm going to go to views, and I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to choose new file. And we can call this anything, but since it's a login, I'm going to call it login.ejs. And what we probably find is at least pretty much it's going to be very similar to the register that we just put in. So I'm going to go over to the register, as we've done before, Control-A, Control-C to copy it, go back to the login, and paste that in. All right, so I now have that. Again, we don't have a route or anything for it yet. We'll build that later. All right. Of course, we want to change the action on the form in here. We don't want it to go to users register. All right. We will want that instead of going from users register, we'll want it to go to users login. And again, that should make sense. All right. All right. Well, what that means is we better go in and build a controller that's going to handle that. All right, and then we better make our changes to our server.js file. So we'll do that right now. All right, so if you haven't saved, it's a good place to do a file save. All right. I'm going to close a couple of these just because I have a lot of stuff open. All right. All right, so I'm going to go in and put in a new route, and a new route says basically I'm going to go into my controllers. All right, I'm going to right mouse click on my controllers, and I'm going to create a new controller. And you'll notice if you look in here, we don't have a login controller in here right now, so that's what we're about to create. So I'm going to put a new file in here and call it logincontroller.js. All right, and it's nice and short. Just a module dot exports equals with our require and our response, request and our response. All right. Res.render, and we'll want it to render eventually the login page. And again, if you want to, feel free to put a paren there. So you can put a paren here and semicolon. That's the whole thing. All right, so we've got this, and all this is supposed to do is it's supposed to say when we get here, it's supposed to show something. Since it's showing something and we're not using it to react to something, it should be a get when we end up putting it in, and we will in just a moment. Does everybody have this? All right. Before I leave, I'm going to do a file save. I don't think we're going to have to do anything more with this, so this login controller, I'm just going to close. All right, I'm going to go back to my server.js file. All right. Now, you might look at this, and you might think, this is really getting ugly. We got all these things, and yeah, it is. Now, technically, it would be possible that we could take all of those and put them in their own folder, and then reference that folder here. You see what I'm saying? After a while, you got to start thinking about, okay, am I making it easier to work with or harder to work with? All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy this line, and this will now be my login controller. As will this. All right. And down here, so line 31 is the new line I just put in, and I'm going to put in a new line 40 in just a second. All right. And I'm going to want that to go to auth login. And again, that'll be my login controller right there. Questions on any of that? So I'm going to save, and as you probably guess, I don't have a link for that right now. So I've got to put that into my navbar.ejs file. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is under layouts, I'm going to again open up navbar.ejs. Do you have it? All right. And after a while, you have to start thinking of where you want to put this stuff. All right. In other words, what do I have in here right now? I've got a home, I've got a new post, I've got a new user, etc. I don't even, it says, I could have said register new user there. So exactly where do we want this? Well, again, that's one of the things I'm going to let you grapple with, figure out where you want to put it, okay? I'm going to actually put mine above my register. All right, so I'm going to copy the one that's here right now. All right, now it's in there twice. And I want to move this over. Oops, like that. All right, now, so this one is the one that I'm going to change right here. Okay. And I'm going to make that login. And again, this has to be auth login because that's the way that we set it up on the other page. All right, does all that make sense? All right, that's in order for us to be able to see the form. But we also want to maybe be able to react to the form, so when something is filled out, we can react to it. All right, so what does that mean? Well, I'm going to do a file save, and I'm going to close this navbar.ejs file. All right, and I'm going to go back into my controller section, and I'm going to add yet another controller. All right, so under controllers here, I'm going to add a new controller. Again, we can call it whatever we want. We've already got a login controller, so I'm going to call this one login user controller. And again, this is the kind of thing that when you're starting to build your own stuff, I was looking at this before, and probably show one post controller is not a great name, etc. So you could go back in and change this if you wanted to, or that's just something that you should keep in mind, is what I'm saying as you go on. Okay? All right, so now we've got our login user controller here. All right? So, well, when we log them in, we're going to have to check in here and make sure that their stuff was correct, like we said before. So one of the things that we're going to bring in here is we're going to do a const bcrypt, equal require bcrypt. Now, one thing to think about with this, just so you know, all right, I'll come right back to this, but I just want to show you something. If in here, when we get up, and I may not have even needed that line in here, what I did was I started removing stuff that I really didn't need. For instance, what we used to have in here, what we had in our server.js file yesterday, was we had a link to our models folder and to our blog post, but we didn't need it now because we pulled it out and put it into its own controller file. Now, even though this is grayed out, you are using that down here, so you do need that. But I very well might not need this bcrypt. And it's one of those things that when you start to go in and you start cleaning up your code, that's what you should look for. And if you're not sure, well, then what do? Well, it's what you think you do. Save the file, comment that out, and run the program again. And if you've got tests, run the tests again. And if you find that there's no problem with it, then you can remove it. I mean, I know that, for instance, what a lot of companies do, we've talked about this kind of thing before, is they don't ever delete users. Instead, what they do is they take the users that aren't going to be users there anymore, and rather than delete them, they put them out to a log file someplace. So they still have a copy of them in case there's a problem later, or in case the user wants to come back again, or whatever. All right? Okay. So let's go back to this login user controller, because right now there's not too much in there. So let's start adding some stuff. We also need here to be able to spell const, right? And again, we have to go to require models. And in the models, we want our user model. And again, I'm going to keep banging the same drum, so to speak. Does everybody understand what's happening in line 2? All right. You are, again, establishing the communication mechanism because in this file, in the users.js file, I'm not going to bring it up, but the one in our models, we did a module exports. So we're basically bringing it in right here. All right? Okay.
You need to capitalize the U in user line 2.
I did what? Here, you mean?
I think you need to.
Yeah, you might be right. It's goofy how some of this stuff is case sensitive and some of it is not case sensitive. All right, then we do our module.exports. And some of it at least is going to look very similar to you, and some of it will be new. So. The first thing we want to do is we want to be able to come in, I'm just putting it in as a comment so you can see, I want to extract the username and the password from req.body. req.body holds everything that was in that form. And in that form we had those two fields, the username and the password. All right, but we want to be able to break them up and use two different fields. So the easiest way typically to do this is like this. We're going to make our own constant in here, and we're going to say username, password, equal req.body, like that. All right, and that will allow us to play with the individual pieces, so to speak, that are in there. All right? Now, you may or may not remember this back from the time when we were going through, we went through some of the MongoDB commands, but we didn't go through all of them. Well, one of them that we can use right here, answer me this question if you would, please. We're about to find a user. How many users should there be with that login and that password? It's not, no. With that login, not with all logins, with that login and that password. There should be one. So there is a find one that we can use here. fact, this has to be in curly braces. Hopefully one of the things that you're starting to see and hopefully also appreciate about this stuff is by no means is it easy. And there's a lot of, I don't know if you'd call it complexity or what to it, and it's very easy to screw it up. You miss a curly brace or you miss a parenthesis or whatever, all right, and it's just not going to work. So we're telling it to do a find one, okay? So we're telling it to go into the database and we're telling it to find something that matches this. Matches what? Well, now we've got to do a compare, all right? So we want to say if user, and in English what that means is this username was found. And I believe I've got an error. Now, we're going to find out in a minute. I think that should be username because that's what we called it up here. All right? So if that's the case, we found the username. Does that make sense to everyone? All right? So if that happened, now we've got to compare the password that went in. So this means that what we put in there for a username, there was a match. But we don't know, so they've found a valid username, but we have no idea whether or not they found a valid password. All right? So we want to do our bcrypt. This was very similar to what I showed you in the from the documentation before. .compare, and we want to compare the password itself from the database with the one the user put in. All right? And when we do this, one of two things is going to happen. There's going to be an error because they don't match, or they're going to match. You can call this anything you want. I called it match because that's what it's going to do, M-A-T-C-H. Again, if you don't like that name, you could call it something else. All right? All right. So, if there's a match, that's good news, right? That means that both there was a username by that name and the password matched. Okay, so that's good. That's actually what we're searching for. So if that happened, all we want to do is redirect them to the home page. Oops, because now they're logged in. All right. Now, if it didn't match, so if we hit the else right here, that means that, yes, they had a valid username, but no, they didn't have a valid password. Maybe they just fat-fingered it or whatever. So there's different things that we can do, but the easiest thing to do is a res.redirect and redirect them to /auth/login. So we're going to bring them right back again to the login page. Now, again, I'm just asking, does all that make sense? Now, if you look up on the screen here, I'm going to give you time to type this, but if you look up on the screen, this said we found the username, right? Right here. But what if they didn't find the username? What if it's Jeff S. and they didn't know that and they put in Jeff? That's wrong if there's no username Jeff, correct? So I can steal this code from right here. You don't have to, but it's easy because it's the same code. And I can put it in there. Just take a look because we're going to take a minute to go over everything that's happening here in just a second. All right? And I'll put a curly here. Or sorry, a semicolon there. And we can actually put one here too. All right. So from the top, you all said you understood these two things, so I'm not going to go over those again. I'm going to just go down into the module.exports. Now we can see everything. And that's username. I don't know why I'm getting dyslexic, but it's and, not nad. All right, the password from the body. So we're attempting to go in. If we find the username they put in was valid, then we are comparing the password that they put in with the actual password. If they match, they're golden. They can go in, they can continue, etc. All right? And that means we put them here. If we hit this, they had a valid username, but they did not have a valid password. And if we hit this, they had an invalid username. Does that make sense? Now, before we can do this, because what I should have done earlier and didn't, and it's okay, because the order in which we do this stuff doesn't matter, but I'm going to go back to my server.js file. All right? And remember, we now not only have a login controller, we got a login user controller. So I'm going to add user here. And here. And if we, so I put in a new line 32 there. And in just a second, I'm going to put, I'm going to put in a new line 42. All right. And this will be a post, of course. All right. And this will be for users login. All right. And this will be our login. I think we call it login user. Whoops, not there. Not that. Sorry. Let me get rid of that. That's wrong. Come on. And I'm going to put in this. Right. Get rid of all that stuff. Put in that. Now I think there's still an error in here. So I'm going to go through and see if I can find what that error is. That literally is what I had for us to be doing through today. Now, before we finish up though, like I said, I'm going to see if I can, so let's do this. I'm going to save, but I think that if I try to put in a new user, I'm still going to get an error. And I'm going to check just to be sure. So new user, and I'll put in Jeff, send, and it's giving me that error. So I'm going to try to figure that out right now. All right, and hopefully I can. If I can't, I'll figure it out by tomorrow, by tomorrow's class. But tomorrow what we're going to do, you may or may not be aware of this, and this is something, believe it or not, we talked about on the first day in AWD 1000. I know that seems like a long time ago, but one of the things that we talked about is the fact that basically when you make requests to a server, those requests, for lack of better words, are stateless. So in other words, if I make a request to Amazon and then Angie makes a request to Amazon, then Gabriel makes a request to Amazon, then I make another request to Amazon, technically to the server, it doesn't differentiate and say, oh, there's two from him, one from her, and one from him. It looks at everything as being basically, it's just a bunch of stuff. So what we're going to want to do tomorrow, and I don't know how complex you think what we've done so far is, but it's going to get more complex because we're going to make a session. So what we're going to do is we're going to say when you're logged in, you will have not only your login credentials, etc., but when you do log in, a cookie will be created for you, which will have a session ID in it. And what the cookie will do is it will allow, really what cookie files are more than anything else, is they're just text files that the server can access, and typically the server writes to the client. All right? So we will do, that's what's on tap for tomorrow. And then on Monday of next week, we will add the error messages, so when the user does something she or he should not do, we let them know. All right? Then on Tuesday, we're just going to try to tie up all the loose ends, so to speak. There's not really going to be a lot that we have to do. That might just be one lecture. I don't know. All right? And what I'm going to do then, like I said, the rest of the week will be lab. But then the following week, we're going to start on React. But before we do that, I'm just going to say, okay, I'm just going to expect on that Monday. It's not that it's going to be due then, but I'm just going to expect. So when would that be? Like a week from Monday, which would be, I think, here, like the 25th, somewhere there in that week of the 25th. I'm going to assume you're done. And we're going to push that stuff out to Heroku. It's different though, because when we pushed the last project we did out to Heroku, we didn't have a database. Now we have a database. So there again, as you probably guessed, there's more complexity in that. So there's a few things that we're going to have to do in order to be able to do that. That's what will take most of the time on Tuesday, is just going over that stuff. Does that all make sense? So I'm going to see if I can fix the error that I've got right now. I'm afraid to turn this thing off because I'm afraid it won't turn back on again, but I can't leave it on. So hopefully Brock fixed it. I've again proven I'm not a hardware person. All right, but he gets a good chuckle out of that, so that's good. All right. So like I said, if I figure out what my error is and I'm able to fix it, I'll start back up again. Otherwise, that'll be it for the lecture today. Questions? All right. And regardless, when by tomorrow when I get this to work or whatever, I'm going to push what I'm working on right now out to GitHub again. Okay? All right. And I mentioned this to you a week or so ago, but I'm going to say it again anyway.